When we think about surviving a medieval winter, history has trained us to believe a comforting myth. We imagine thick stone houses, roaring hearth fires, and people hardened by generations of hardship. The past feels rugged, yes, but also strangely prepared, as if medieval people simply knew how to survive, and winter was just another season they endured. But history books rarely talk about what winter actually meant. They don't show the constant hunger, the darkness that swallowed entire days, or the cold that never truly left your body, no matter how close you sat to the fire. So I decided to strip away the myth and test the reality. No modern heating, no electricity, no synthetic clothing, no packaged food. Just ancient tools, traditional shelter, preserved meals, and the same survival knowledge people relied on centuries ago. What I expected was discomfort. What I encountered was something far more revealing. Cold wasn't just a temperature, it was a condition that shaped every decision. Fire wasn't comfort, it was survival. And food wasn't nourishment, it was time, effort, and constant calculation. Within days, it became clear why winter dominated medieval life, why communities planned for it all year long. Why did illness, exhaustion, and death spike when the cold arrived? This wasn't about toughness or grit. It was about endurance in a world where small mistakes carried lasting consequences. Surviving a medieval winter wasn't heroic. It was uncertain, relentless, and unforgiving. And that reality changes how we understand the past forever. This video is not about proving strength or chasing extremes. It's about understanding what survival truly meant in a medieval world, where winter decided who lived comfortably, who struggled, and who didn't make it through at all. By removing modern convenience, I wanted to see how daily life changed when every basic need required time, energy, and planning. Heat had to be earned. Food had to be protected months in advance. Rest was never guaranteed because survival didn't pause for cold or darkness. What this experiment reveals is how fragile life became once temperatures dropped. Simple tasks took longer. Mistakes became costly. A failed fire, damp clothing, or a poorly preserved meal could turn into a serious threat. Medieval people didn't survive winter because they were stronger than us. They survived because they structured their entire lives around preparation, cooperation, and restraint. Winter exposed weaknesses not in the body alone, but in systems, habits, and decisions made long before the first snowfall. Throughout this journey, I rely only on historically grounded methods: traditional shelter, period-appropriate clothing layers, preserved foods, and manual fire-making. No shortcuts, no modern fixes. By living inside these limits, the goal isn't suffering, it's clarity. Clarity about why winter shaped medieval calendars, labor cycles, diets, and social bonds. And by the end, you'll see that surviving a medieval winter wasn't a single challenge. It was a slow, ongoing test of discipline, foresight, and resilience. Understanding that reality doesn't just change how we view the past, it changes how we understand comfort, security, and survival today. The storm didn't arrive dramatically. There was no warning, no sudden change that felt cinematic. The temperature dropped first, quietly, almost politely. Then the wind followed, cutting through layers of wool and leather as if they were suggestions, not protection. Snow came last, heavy and relentless, erasing tracks, landmarks, and any sense of distance. In a medieval winter, a blizzard wasn't an event you watched. It was something you were trapped inside, with no clear idea of when it would end. Inside the shelter, everything slowed down. Firewood disappeared faster than expected. Moisture crept into clothing and bedding, turning rest into another struggle. Every movement required intention because energy was limited, and recovery took longer in the cold. Even eating became strategic. Meals were smaller, carefully spaced, chosen not for comfort, but for efficiency. Hunger didn't arrive all at once. It settled in quietly, day after day, dulling focus and draining strength. What became most clear during the storm was how little margin for error existed. A fire that failed to catch, hands that grew numb too quickly, a roof that trapped smoke instead of warmth. None of these were dramatic failures, but each carried consequences that compounded over time. Medieval survival wasn't about overcoming nature. It was about avoiding small losses that slowly became impossible to recover from. As the blizzard dragged on, the past stopped feeling distant. This wasn't a reenactment anymore. It was a lesson written in cold, exhaustion, and patience. Winter didn't test bravery, it tested preparation. And in that moment, it became obvious why medieval communities feared isolation more than hunger itself. Alone, every mistake belonged to you. Together, survival had a chance. When the storm finally loosened its grip, nothing felt like victory. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was cautious. Snow still covered the ground, firewood was low, and energy had to be rationed just as carefully as before. Survival didn't end when the blizzard passed. That, more than anything, defined medieval winter. There was no finish line, no moment where danger disappeared. Only a gradual return to routine, shaped by the knowledge that another storm could arrive at any time. Looking back, the hardest part wasn't the cold or the hunger. It was the constant awareness of limits. Every decision carried weight. Every resource had a future cost. Medieval people didn't live with comfort as the goal. They lived with continuity in mind. Stay warm enough. Eat just enough. Preserve what you can. Waste nothing. These weren't virtues. They were necessities, built into daily life by winter itself. This experience reframed the past in a way no book ever could. Medieval survival wasn't primitive. It was precise. It required discipline, cooperation, and an understanding of nature that modern life rarely demands from us anymore. Winter shaped social bonds, labor rhythms, and even morality. Helping a neighbor wasn't kindness. It was insurance because no one survived alone for long. By stepping into these ancient limits, the experiment revealed something unexpectedly modern. Comfort is fragile. Systems matter. And survival has always depended less on strength than on preparation and community. A medieval winter didn't just test the body, it tested the structure of life itself. And understanding that reality doesn't romanticize the past, it respects it. Even after the storm passed, winter remained a presence you could feel in every corner of daily life. The air inside the shelter never truly warmed. Stone and wood absorbed cold slowly and released it just as slowly, meaning that even hours beside the fire only softened the edge, never erased it. Sleep became fragmented, interrupted by the need to tend embers or adjust damp bedding. In medieval winter, rest was shallow, borrowed in short intervals rather than claimed fully. Food revealed itself as the most unforgiving constraint. Preserved meals carried the weight of earlier seasons, the labor of harvest, the patience of drying and curing, the risk of spoilage. Every bite represented past effort and future survival. There was no concept of eating for pleasure. Flavor mattered far less than density, shelf life, and reliability. Hunger wasn't sharp, it was persistent, a background pressure that shaped mood, focus, and judgment. Over time, it became clear why medieval diets were monotonous by necessity. Variety invited waste. Waste invited risk. Fire, often romanticized in stories of the past, proved to be both ally and burden. Keeping it alive demanded constant attention. Gathering fuel in winter consumed more energy than it returned. Wet wood smoked, smoked wood poisoned air, and poorly vented shelters turned warmth into danger. Fire wasn't comfort. It was a system that could fail quietly and punish mistakes without warning. Medieval people didn't sit around fires to relax. They worked around them because survival depended on maintaining that fragile balance. Clothing, too, told a harsher story than expected. Layers helped, but moisture was the enemy. Snow melted, breath condensed, and dampness crept into wool and leather despite care. Drying garments indoors stole heat from the fire and time from other tasks. Wearing them wet drains energy faster than cold alone. Medieval clothing wasn't inadequate. It was simply unforgiving. It demanded constant management, awareness, and restraint in movement. Even walking became a calculated act to avoid sweating and freezing afterward. What stood out most was how winter reshaped time itself. Days felt shorter not only because of fading light, but because productivity narrowed. Tasks took longer, mistakes required recovery time. Planning extended beyond hours and days into weeks and seasons. Medieval survival relied on thinking ahead in a way modern life rarely requires. The present was always tied to the past and the future, and winter punished anyone who failed to respect that connection. Isolation amplified everything. Without community, every task fell on a single body. Gathering fuel, maintaining shelter, preparing food, repairing damage, each demanded energy that could not be spared indefinitely. Medieval villages weren't formed for convenience. They were survival structures. Shared labor reduced individual risk. Knowledge passed between generations wasn't tradition for tradition's sake. It was accumulated survival data, refined by winters that had already claimed lives. Illness, even minor one, took on a new significance. A cough lingered longer. Fatigue deepened faster. Recovery slowed. In a medieval winter, health wasn't a personal issue. It was a survival variable. Without reserves, the body couldn't afford inefficiency. This explained why winter mortality shaped demographics so strongly in the past. Not through catastrophe alone, but through accumulation. Cold plus hunger plus exhaustion, layered patiently over time. As weeks passed, resilience stopped feeling heroic and started feeling procedural. Survival became routine, not because it was easy, but because repetition reduced risk. Medieval life didn't celebrate endurance, it normalized it. And in doing so, it stripped suffering of drama. There were no moments of triumph, only continuity. You survived today so you could survive tomorrow. And that was enough. By the end of the experiment, the most powerful realization wasn't how harsh medieval winter was, but how intelligently life was structured around it. Calendars, labor divisions, food systems, and social obligations all pointed toward one truth. Winter was not an interruption. It was the central organizing force of the year. Everything else existed in preparation for it or recovery from it. Stepping back into modern comfort after living within those limits felt disorienting. Heat appeared instantly. Food was abundant and forgettable. Light extended the day beyond natural boundaries. These conveniences weren't just luxuries. They were buffers that erased entire categories of risk. And without those risks, it became easier to forget what survival once required. This experiment wasn't about nostalgia or suffering. It was about accuracy, about stripping away romantic ideas and replacing them with respect for the systems that kept people alive when nature offered no forgiveness. Medieval winter wasn't cruel by design, it was indifferent. Survival depended on understanding that indifference and building life around it. And in that understanding lies the real lesson. Human survival has never depended on dominance over nature, but on cooperation, preparation, and restraint. The past didn't survive because it was tougher than we are. It survived because it listened to winter and planned accordingly.